Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron. That's a picture of Lambert K, the old pet food factory. Picture was taken as you come down from Highland Lake. It is now owned by the town of Winchester. They bought it for $1 roughly 10 years ago or so, maybe 8-9 years ago. And they've owned it ever since. So they don't get any taxes from it. Matter of fact, it's a liability because it's deteriorating over the years. Now, I haven't finished my research on this building yet, because as a member of the EDC, I have taken a special individual interest in many things, one of which is these old buildings down in the center of town that are either unoccupied or mostly unoccupied. And I began to go through all these history of these buildings, talk to the real estate agents in the town and other people that have been involved over the years in EDC and the Redevelopment Commission, and local residents and interested town people. And right now, I still have more research to do here, but evidently after we bought it for $1, we had a chance. We put together, I guess, a commission, try to put together some plans for the building and its property. I guess there were some pretty grandiose plans put together. I'll let you know in a future program what they were after I study the documents in the town hall. Maybe put a hospital there, or some kind of, the police station there, or maybe even that's now what you see up there. There you go, back to Lambert K again. We see the picture. Got a little confusion in the here now. Somebody left the door open on the way in, so you might hear a little noise from time to time by people coming in to pay their bills and things. But the first look at it was by some commission was set up by the town, and they wanted to look at grandiose plans for using it. Of course, the problem is always no money. The town can have a lot of plans, and always does have a lot of plans, a lot of great ideas, but no money to back those aspirations. So what happened was they went through that commission, and they had somebody come in who wanted to buy the property. It was for sale for $50,000, and wanted to buy the property and do certain things with it. Went through the process, and in the end, from what I can tell, hey, after you leave, guys, can you close that door over there? So, okay. From what I can tell, the deal fell through for one reason or another. And when I ask people about it, they say, well, the reason the deal fell through was the town wasn't interested. They couldn't get the purchaser couldn't get answers back from the town, couldn't get any satisfaction, and finally just sort of threw in the towel and gave up. Now, I'll check on all that, and I'll let you know exactly what happened in a future program. But that's kind of the impression I get when I talk to people about the past of this building. And then along came another purchaser a few years back, before the recession, and was involved again, purchasing the building for $50,000 or so, with certain conditions on it, that the town do this or the town do that. And then we got hit by the recession, and there was some confusion between the prospective purchaser and the town. And again, that deal fell through, and that never happened. There were other people interested in this building along the way, and I've talked to some of them. One was a group of local entrepreneurs, and they wanted to perhaps buy the building for a very low sum, say $1 or $2, and then not pay any taxes on it for, say, 2 years or 3, until about half the building was rented out after they spent their own money to do any reclamation needed for hazardous materials, and then put in some 1,000-square-foot offices for various people who wanted to rent them for business purposes, or probably any other purposes that were within the use. They didn't want to change the use, because when you change the use of a building, you have to go through much more red tape with the town, probably all for good reason. I wouldn't argue with it, but basically it strings it out, costs money, and then you might run into more problems there. But there is some reclamation needed on the property, and people have a different way of approaching that. These entrepreneurs wanted to use their own money, and they wanted to get it all cleaned up. They wanted to encapsulate perhaps some of the contamination that's on the outside of the building. Maybe they would have torn down a couple of the exterior buildings, and then they would have got it back on the tax rolls eventually, and try to get it full of rent-paying renters, and get it profitable and pay more tax to the town, including personal property tax, which is always very profitable for our town. Well, they never went very far with their approach. I don't even think they really discussed it with the town much, because the other two people, one after the other, were in there trying to do a deal with the town to purchase the property. But I wanted to bring up that example because there's kind of 2 or 3 ways that this building could be sold, in my opinion, personal opinion. And one is to somebody who'll come in with big dollars and go to the government and get either loans or grants, to clean up the building, get rid of the contamination, buy the building, and then upgrade the building to whatever use they want to have. The other approach is for somebody to come in, buy the building, getting grants or loans or whatever, tear the building down, reclaim the property one way or another, get it back in shape again. And that's mainly needed when you're trying to borrow money from a bank or borrow money from the government, local, state, or Fed. They put all those requirements on you to go through a process and clean up the land. If you use your own money, then you can get by without that happening too much. Now, if you're going to go for money from any government of any sort, it's always going to probably cost you, and this is just a rough idea, you might be able to do it a little better than this, but say 3 to 1. If you were going to put $1 in it as of your own money as an owner, you probably would spend, say, $1, where if you borrowed from the state or the feds or even the town maybe, or a bank, you might have to spend $3 to do that same amount of work, maybe even more. Because all those loans come with a long string. There's a different view of the building here, side view. They all come with a long string of conditions attached. For example, you may have to use union labor. For example, you may have to use expensive engineers to plan and review the progress, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know all these conditions, but it does come with a long string of conditions. So entrepreneurs tend to avoid that approach. These are people with deep pockets that would do that, but they don't have deep enough pockets to do it themselves. So they will go and try to get these loans. And then they get into this long process of trying to get the loan approved. There's all kinds of conditions that have to happen there. Or even to be able to use loans that and grants that are already available in the town, but the town would have to help you get the use of those. So in the long run, if you don't have the money in your pocket, it can be expensive. It's just like kind of the way the economy is now. If you want to go out and buy a new house and you don't have deep pockets, you will only be allowed to get so much money from the bank depending upon your net worth and how much you earn and all that kind of thing. So we got pretty strict requirements now. But if you have a lot of money, then you can go out and buy whatever you want for whatever price, and you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So most entrepreneurs, when they look at this kind of thing, they try to save the building because it's much more expensive not to. They try to do it with their own money. That means it has to be at a time where they have the money. They haven't got it invested in some other investment that hasn't paid off yet. Now, we have many entrepreneur investors in this town. People come in, buy buildings with their own money, and then fix up the old mills and use them for either apartments like down on Whiting Avenue or Whiting Street, I can never remember the name of it, and the Whiting Mills building. And then you have people that are that come in and as nonprofits, and they buy buildings, and then they go out and they try to borrow money, get money granted to them one way or another, or given to them by various foundations and people who give money to these nonprofits. One of them we have in town is for the Wall of America. The other is for the Tort Museum. They're out all the time trying to raise money to get their buildings into shape for use by their whatever plans they have for use of the building. And that takes a long time. Now, you'll see a lot of people, I see it in the paper once in a while, and I hear people talk about, well, what we ought to do in Winston is we ought to just go down and tear every building down that's not in use and hasn't been used for 10 years and all that. But there's never anybody who says, here's the money to do that. And there's nobody who says that. Everybody's got ideas. But when it comes time to actually do something, there's no money available. And anybody you ever talk to on the EDC, and you ask them, in the history of the EDC that I know, you ask them, why don't things get done here downtown? And they all say, because there's no money. We can never get any money, one way or another, and some investors can, and we have many of them. The Colt Building is an example of some entrepreneurs that are redoing that old Nader building, and they're redoing the apartments. They're going to redo the ground floor, and they don't have any contamination there from what I gather, so they're in pretty good shape. But we have entrepreneurs all over town that have actually bought buildings and are updating them and putting in businesses. Now, it does get a little tricky with these old buildings, because some of them, if you do them within the same footprint and you do them for the same use, then it's a lot easier. If you want to change the use or change the footprint, or if they've been empty for 6 months or longer, some of them have been empty for years, then all kinds of new rules, all kinds of rules exist in the town planning boards, which make it much more difficult, and you have to apply for exceptions, and you may or may not get them. The other big problem we have is that we're right on the river down here. Most of these things are along the river, and they're along the river on purpose, because in the early days, the river was the power for all these buildings, and it was very important for them. But now, it's very difficult to tear things down and rebuild them, because you might have the Army Corps of Engineers involved, you might have the DEP involved, you certainly will have the inland wetlands and the planning and zoning involved, maybe even the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's a long, laborious process that many feel won't pay off, so it scares them away. And where you find people that do it, the ones that are more successful in town now, it's where there's a minimum amount of contamination. There's a minimum. They don't want to tear the building down. They want to maybe change the use, and they have to get permission for that. If it was an old factory and they wanted to make it into apartments, they have to go through the land use boards for that. But basically, it's a complex situation. And it's less complex if it's in an area where there's no pressure groups, neighbors or town groups and pressure groups that don't want anything to happen in those areas, or they want certain things to happen that nobody seems to want to pay to do. In the areas where people have conservation type major issues, then it becomes much more difficult to do things. Now, with that first building, and he's got a Capital Products up there now, but I'm still talking about Lambert K, and I will for a while yet. So, but basically, Lambert K is over the years, while we've been trying to sell it, we've had to use it for storage of things in the town that we get from when we evict people for one reason or another from their homes or apartments or whatever. We take and we have in the past stored their possessions that were left in this building, and the building has filled up with all these old possessions. I don't know exactly what's in there, but their refrigerators, stoves, whatever was left when they were evicted, and then they had to be in there for a certain length of time, so people had a chance to reclaim them, and that went for years, and so now the building is full of that kind of thing. Also, in a year or two ago, the roof caved in on it, and part of the building, you don't see that here, but the windows are always broken, and then you can see the roof's in pretty bad shape. So things are happening there. Now, recently, Arthur Bogan, who is one of our brownfield consultants, and the brownfield consultant, I guess, for the town, he suggested that maybe we try to get somebody to come in and deconstruct the building. There are people who will pay you money to come in and deconstruct the building, take it apart brick by brick and floorboard by floorboard, and then they'll pay you for that. We won't get rich off of it, but they'll pay you some money for all the materials. And they'll basically take the building down in a specific manner. And then they'll pay for whatever it is that they bid on it to deconstruct it. But before you can do that, you have to have a hazardous material study done inside the building to see if that building has lead paint, which we know it does, has asbestos, which we know it does, and I guess they check for many other things too, just like you would if you were going to tear an old house down. I had to do that when I tore down my bungalow at the lake. It was 100 years old. Luckily, we didn't find any hazardous materials, but you have to do that. And then if you do have hazardous materials in there, you have to let these people know who are going to bid on a deconstruction, and then they have to handle it a certain way. As an extreme, they may have to put a plastic bubble over the building before they do things. I don't know, I'm just giving you a rough idea here. But basically, there's procedures they'd have to follow, and then they have to take the hazardous material away to a place where they dump hazardous material. And they put it in a truck, and they take it to some other state or somewhere else, maybe another country, I don't know. And they manage that. Now, so one of the options on this building now that the EDC is looking at is to say, and they haven't made any decisions at all, they're just looking at the option of getting the hazardous materials study done. That's a little tricky because the building is kind of condemned now, and the building official doesn't want anybody just going in there willy-nilly, so he likes to accompany them in. And I think today somebody went in there to have a look at it to give the town an idea what it would cost to do a hazardous materials study. And then once that's done, then we have to try to find the money for it, because you have to pay to have that done, and then you have to go out to bid, because the town owns the property. They require 3 bidders at least, I think, unless there's certain reasons why not. And then you get the bids in. You then do whatever you have to do in the town to get permission to do it, and then you do it. You deconstruct it, you get the money, and then you're left with a piece of land. I think this building's about 20,000 square feet, and there's some little buildings on it. But then that piece of land would then have to be reclaimed under certain cases. That land could be sold to somebody who may want to go after a brownfield grant, or may want to go after some government loan, or may want to have to go to the bank to try to get money. But again, if people have their own money, they can, they can have do a little more inexpensively, and they can have more control over the situation. And entrepreneurs like that. So most of them, now if it's somebody who come in and wants to build a hospital there, or wants to build a government building, and or wants to build a big building for commercial purposes or industrial purposes, then they have to go through all the land use boards, follow the rules, and those keep changing over the years. So that if you don't tear the building down, you have the option of fixing it up in the same footprint. You have and if you're going to use it for the same use, then you have a lot less bureaucracy to go through. And often when people go through this bureaucracy to change the use and build a new building, they don't get through the other end. Because it goes along for a long time. It's expensive. There's politics involved. Some people want this, some people want that. So right now, the Lambert K building is still open for entrepreneurs who may want to buy it and do something with it, and work out a deal with the town. It's open to developers who may want to buy something and do things with it. That's open to a deal with the town. There's this option of the town itself deconstructing the building and then either selling the land, or cleaning up the land and then selling the land. Now, to clean it up, that may cost, let's just throw a number out here, don't hold me to this, $100,000. So that money would have to be raised one way or another, either by gifts to the town, grants to the town, taxes, maybe a tax, $100,000 bond or something like that. And then it could be, one way or another, get cleaned up and have it put to productive use. So the EDC is leading this effort now, and has been for a month or two, to try to get this back on the tax rolls and out of the town's hands, suppliers and things like that, and some by the governments, maybe a little by the state and a little bit by the feds. So altogether, in taxes owed and liens on the building is roughly $230,000 to $50,000. Well, it's hard for somebody to come in and say, I'll buy that for $250,000 and clean up all these back taxes and liens. And oh, by the way, I'll then have to I'll get a brownfield grant or some state or federal grant, and that'll cost me $250,000 or so, maybe $300,000, according to the paper written by the person representing the owners. So now you got $230,000 or $40,000 plus the reclamation money, which might be another $250,000 to get rid of the contamination, maybe $300,000. So now guess what? You're up to $500,000 to $600,000. And then when you get done with that, you've got to get the building into reasonable shape for renting, to get money to come in and to be a profitable little business for yourself. Now, the building has other limitations. It's right on the river, it would almost have to be used with the same use, manufacturing of one sort or another. And it's in the same, it doesn't have any room for parking. 90% of the building, or the building takes up 90% of the footprint of the property. So there's not much room there. There's only a small bay to bring in things into the factory. There's no elevators in there. A lot of work needs to be done inside for restoring the factory, depending upon what you want to do in there. So anyway, this guy, Henry H.J. Marshall, he came in, and he's an entrepreneur. He usually works with his own money. And he said, look, I will guarantee the town $2,500 as a bid at the auction, and the town would try to get the property put into a tax auction, and then foreclosure. And then Henry said he would bid at least $2,500 for the building, and maybe more. If some other people came in and bid on the building as well, he might raise his bid, or he might drop out, in which case the town would be all right because somebody else would be paying more. But if he got lumbered with the building, so to speak, I asked Henry, what would you do if you got the building? What would you do with the building? Would you go for a brownfield grant? And he said, no, I wouldn't go for any state or federal money because it's too expensive. I'll use my own money because I can do for $1 or so, and have done so in other parts of town, contaminated buildings and things, what they would cost me $3.50, maybe $4 to do. So the estimates that we got of $250,000 to $300,000 would then be more like $100,000. So Henry would get in. He would first get the building rented out. He'd clean up some windows and things. He would get the building rented out, and he would rent it out to little manufacturing type users, which he had lined up and had an interest in coming into the building, probably 3 or 4 different ones. They would work without an elevator and with a small shipping in and out bay, and with the building in the shape mainly that it was in. And they would refurbish products like appliances and things, or do other light manufacturing type things in the building so that he could stay within the use. Because if you don't stay within the use, there's a good possibility that you have to upgrade the building to the latest building code. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure you have to do that. So, and that's expensive. That might cost him a few $100,000, maybe more or less. So he would try to stay within the use. There's another problem in that the building's been empty for 6 months, so there'd need to be a site plan agreed. It's on the river, and this and that. So anyway, that's what he was going to do. And then he was going to take the rent money that he was going to get in, and he was going to start to do the reclamation. And he submitted the offer to the town. I have a copy of the offer through his agents and his lawyers and through the owner or whatever. And he got an answer back from our town attorney through his attorney saying, well, we want you, and I'm just paraphrasing here, I don't have the exact words right now, but we'd like you to clean it up, the contamination, within 2 years, or pay us the taxes, or we'll take the building back, or whatever. So he did get an answer on that, and that's kind of was a negotiating tactic used by the town. The next step was, Henry said, well, 2 years is too quick for me. I won't get enough rent. Let me take 5 years, and I'll get it done within 5 years. And they never answered him. According to Henry H.J. Marshall and his agent representing the owners of the building, never got an answer back from the town. Now, all the facts aren't known about why he didn't get an answer back from the town. It's very hard to find out any information about this. And that's one of the reasons why recently the selectmen have said to the EDC, okay, you take the lead on this building and Lambert K, and basically, to get all the facts on the table, consider all offers, pro and con, make sure it's very visible, all the information, and then let's try to get this building back on the tax rolls again. And again, it can be done in many ways. To me, the entrepreneurial approach seems to be working best in this town. You don't see many old buildings getting torn down. It's usually entrepreneurs come in and find some way to use these buildings and to try to make them work, because it's too expensive to do it otherwise. Most of the other change of use type applications require more parking, require a lot of upgrade to the building, expensive upgrade to the building, and all kinds of other red tape, getting loans, getting grants, dealing with the Army Corps if necessary, and the wetlands at the state level, and our own land use boards. And there are different people in town who like to see this property used in different ways. Some would like to see it disappear and become a parking lot for the town. Some would like to see it back on the tax rolls again. Parking lots don't get on the tax rolls, and people say, yeah, well, they help you get around town. But if you go to places that the town looks towards, like Great Barrington, Joyce and I walked around there one Saturday in the rain. Most of the parking areas are outside. You're not downtown in the center of town. Most of the buildings in Great Barrington are what we call reclaimed, redeveloped. The parking lots are on the perimeter around the town, which makes a lot of sense because people can walk a couple blocks to get to the town. Parking lot doesn't need to be right on the main street. Now, if there's no other possible use and you can't get any taxes out of it, then maybe in the long run it ends up as a parking lot. But I wouldn't say that's really the best answer and solution to the problem. So we're still entertaining offers for that building. If you know any entrepreneurs who are interested in it, Henry Marshall has withdrawn his offer. He's still confused about why he did not get the offer answered by the town. There's a lot of confusion about that, a lot of misunderstanding. The mayor says he never presented a plan. His representatives say he did present a plan. Mr. Marshall was a member of the EDC at the time, and I don't know whether that is a problem or not, but at least it should have been discussed openly with the ethics people and with the legal department in town, legal attorney, and they should have applied whatever rule they apply in these things. We do have a selectman who is trying to do a nonprofit, Selectman Renzullo, and he may end up buying one of these buildings, perhaps Capital Products, and then trying to reclaim it with money that he gets from one source or another, and then get it back on the tax rolls, which I think is admirable. But he recuses himself whenever anything like this comes up, as did H.J. Marshall, and everybody just has to make sure that everything is done above board and ethically and legally. And we want to encourage people, no matter who they are in town, to take an active role, whether a selectman or a commissioner or anything, as long as it's done legally and ethically. No argument there. So I wish Selectman Renzullo good luck, and Henry Marshall has resigned from the EDC now, so he's not a problem, but other people might come forward. I don't think that his being on EDC had anything to do with it whatsoever. But if we had openly gone through the process, then people couldn't use that as a questionable excuse. So now, down deep, people do have hidden agendas here, and one of the things that I personally would like to do is get them all out in the open and just make sure that before any decision is made on any of these buildings, that all the facts are on the table and that the options are considered in a business-like manner, not a political manner or not any hidden agenda type manner, but in a very straightforward, factual comparison with experts' advice. And I'm not one to try to outsmart the experts. I know too much about using experts and how important they can be used and what qualifications they have to do their job. But if we keep questioning the experts all the time and hiring more and more $60,000 to $50,000, $60,000 advisors to get another 12 or 14 plans that never worked in the past or will never work in the future, we're not going to get anywhere. And the other thing I think that you have to consider is that on these buildings is that it's easy to say let's tear them down, it's easy to say let's get rid of them, it's easy to say let's sell them, but it doesn't seem to work here. It doesn't work in most of the factory towns up and down the valley in this section of the country, or in Michigan, or anywhere else. And unless the owner pays to have them torn down for one reason or another, it might be cheaper to tear a building down than to pay the taxes on it if you're a viable company. If you're not a viable company, it wouldn't be. So that's happening now. The EDC has taken a strong interest in that with the town manager and the land use boards and anybody else around. And we're going to try to get this back on the tax rolls in one form or another. And if not, try to get a responsible decision made as to what to do with this property, because we're not going to get the tax money out of the existing people. They're going to have to work a deal with somebody who's going to come in and try either go through a foreclosure process or clean up all these taxes and liens and all the reclamation that needs to be done, plus the rejuvenation of the building itself. So you're talking $1 million here. This is not peanuts. So when people come to town and say, "You expect me to pay $1 million for all that before I, start to make any money on it?" And our business plan says, well, if we do that, we'll never make any money on it. So we have to look at this thing from a business-like perspective, because we, the town, are a business, and we do have this building who owes us money and mounting, minimum of 18% a year, maybe more. And we have Lambert K paying no taxes whatsoever and rotting in front of our face and not providing any useful benefit right now to the town at all. Right? So these are two I wanted to talk about tonight. Now I want to add another thing tonight, if I can, and I'd like to add just a little bit about the furniture building across the street here from Capital Products, 10 Bridge Street. It's called the Winstead Furniture Building by people now, but over many, 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 many years, it's had all kinds of uses. It's a big factory. I don't know exactly how many square feet, but it's big. I got a couple pictures of it here tonight so you can get an idea. And it's been for sale for many, many, many years, and it's now owned by a company down in New York. And I've talked to them on the telephone, as I have the representatives for Capital Products. And it's for sale, as you see on the sign. There are two pieces of property there. One is is assessed value is $127,120. I got that today from the assessor's office, and the other one for $243,670,000. So there you got $375,000 or so in assessed value, and as far as I know, they are paying taxes on there. And when I talked to it's called XKC Capital, it's in New York City, They own it, and they said it has a long history, which I'm not going to go into here today. But they said it's for sale for $300,000, and they're paying taxes now. And I said to him, "Are the taxes up to date?" I haven't checked this yet, but he said yes, they're up to. They should be. If not, we will bring them up to date. And then I said, "Well, for that amount of money, $300,000, do you have any commitments with the town?" And because there are a lot of rumors about secret meetings with various town groups, and he said, "No, we have no commitments with the town whatsoever, and we're just looking for somebody to buy the property." So I said, "Well, what happens if somebody wants you to do a little work on it before they buy it?" He said, "Well, not at that price." Now, they bought it for, according to the town records, $165,000 a year or so ago, maybe a little longer, and they've put it up for $300,000. Now, the problem with this building is the same as the other buildings. This building, although it's paying taxes, it's paying minimal because it doesn't pay any personal property taxes because there's no personal property there. They may have some rental units there. I don't know. I don't know exact configuration of the place, but it's expensive. People have looked at it in the past to make 100 apartments in there, to put in artsy type places with apartments, mixed-use type applications. And for one reason or another, that's never, ever come to fruition. And again, I would say, and this is just Brian's speculation here after looking into it a little bit, is that it's too expensive to do anything with it and make any money. I think one person looked at it, one business looked at it, said, okay, it's going to take $10 million to get it to the state we want it for 100 apartments or so. And we can't afford that kind of money, so we'd need some amount of money from somewhere else, like $3 million. Well, that never came to fruition, because what happens is, if something isn't going to be a good business deal, good businessmen won't get involved in it. They won't buy it. They'll do all their numbers up front, and they'll make darn sure that they know exactly what they're getting into and what it's going to take to make a profit on the building, or at least break even, if they were altruistic. And I think I mentioned on the Planning for Success program a few years ago that John Brooks, who died at the age of 100 or so, that owned Brooks Bank in Torrington, almost to the day he died, he signed every loan himself. And he did that for a reason. He did that to make sure that he was putting out loans that would be good for the person who was getting the loan and good for the bank, and that he would try to stay away from the kind of situation we got ourselves in the last 3 or 4 years in America, where people were given loans they couldn't afford, and delayed interest payments and all that kind of thing, and balloon type thing, and blew up the country and almost the world. So, there's no miracle going to happen here. And in order to get this thing into a situation where it can be used again, even as a parking lot, or it's easier to use it as a parking lot, because I'm not suggesting we do that, but if you use it as a building and don't change its use, then you got to go in there, you got to do a lot of work, you got to do some reclamation, you got to figure out how people are going to park that want to use the building. And, you got to solve all those problems. And there's other people who think, well, maybe we can have have somebody buy that building and do a deconstruction. So basically, when you do a deconstruction, you sell off the bricks and the floorboards and all to somebody who wants that old stuff to use in the artsy area of New York or something. And you get some money out of it. And then you take that money and you try to say, well, now how can we reclaim the land? But remember, once the building's gone, then that's a big impediment out of the way for some people. Other people think it's a big detriment to take the building down. There are two sides to that story. But if you want to make a parking lot within the rules, and I'm not an expert on all this, then you can consider encapsulating with tar or something. Like I'm sure we have some ex-gas stations in town, things like that that's happened with, and then at least you got a parking lot there. I'm not suggesting we do that, but if you want to make it into a green field, and remember, the people who want to make it into the green fields are the people who have the least amount of money to do it. Then you got a real problem with the contamination. And it's tough because there's no way to encapsulate it. You can't put another building on top of it or tar for a parking lot or anything like that. So I once talked to the town planner about, this was a long time ago, about when Ernie Wolf was trying to reclaim the land at the lake from the old pin shop up there. And I asked, and he got stuck for one reason along the way. I don't know all the details. He's now passed away, but somebody else owns it. But I asked him, town, well, what if we didn't want to do a hotel up there and the town wanted to purchase the land and use it as a park? He said, well, then you got a lot more reclamation to do, because the process up there was, and it was over $1 million. What they did do was to encapsulate a certain amount of the contamination under the new hotel, which was going to be a 60-room hotel, plus all the other restaurants and whatever else they were going to have in there. So that kind of made it very expensive to make it into a park, where you put some picnic benches and a couple cookers and, that kind of thing. So this is big, serious business here. There's a reason why all these towns still have these buildings and nothing ever gets done. It's because it's a Hobson's choice to a certain extent. It's why would somebody come in and buy these unless they had some money and they wanted to do a certain thing a certain way, and they could get it done for a reasonable cost, when they could go somewhere else and not have to go through any of this. Just go over to Barkhamsted or some other town in the vicinity and build a new building, which may or may not be cheaper. But I've been told that, it'll probably be a lot, $250 to $300 a square foot to build large buildings on these property once these buildings are torn down. And then you'd have to go through all the problems with all the land use boards, the Army Corps of Engineers if necessary, the DEP if necessary, and other areas. So don't expect any miracles to happen here. And EDC, although we're concentrating, as I understand it, mostly on Lambert K and Capital Products, we're also interested in these other buildings. And once those two are off the list, maybe then we would concentrate more on the furniture building and some of the other buildings in town that need the same thing, same approach. Now, I want to say, I only got 5 minutes left, but I want to say to you that people have a funny, entrepreneurs are never really appreciated until they're successful. Because entrepreneurs think out of the box a lot. They lateral think, system think, positive thinkers, put up their own money, take a lot of risk, fail a lot, take a lot of abuse. And not everybody has those capabilities. And the way our system works in America is that when people have a real good entrepreneurial idea, then investment venture capitalists get involved. And there are people who take money, big sums of money, from the big companies around America and around the world. A lot of it comes from outside America. And they invest in entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs or in Microsoft, or that's where the money comes from. And as I said on a previous program, every time you have to go back to the venture capitalists for money, you lose a certain percentage of your company. And because they have to buy an interest in your company to give you more working capital. So you have to sell some of your interest. And some people will start out with 100%, end up with 3%. But that 3% might make them multi-billionaires. And we have a lot of them on the West Coast. They're everywhere. We have a lot of them in America. America is still the best place in the world to be an entrepreneur because venture capital is available, and it's all reasonable, and we're structured that way. We have good schools, good everything. So we're getting towards the end now. I want to say, keep an eye on all this. You'll see a lot of interest. The rest of the buildings in town, which I consider sort of business as usual, the prices are dropping on those empty buildings, like the drugstore and the coffee shop, some of which isn't empty, but the bowling alley, all these kind of things, the Burwell property. Prices will be going down. There's going to be more excitement in the area, and this is supply and demand that takes place in recessions, and things get cheap. I just know somebody who bought a house that was $350,000 down in Florida a few years ago, and now it's $125,000. Excellent house. So that's the way America works, and things go up and they go down, and they go in and out and around, and we are starting to get interest in our town again because the prices are going down. But these big albatrosses, they're going to be tough. And we're going to have to get together, and we may even have to bond some money, small amounts. People aren't going to like that. Or we got to divert money from the schools or from the town to be able to tear these things down or to reclaim them if we can't get anybody else to do it. Or we can keep them forever, and they'll sooner or later just fall down, but even that's not cheap. So with that, I'd say thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now. And I'll see you in the future with another program and another update on the things that are happening around the town. Getting things done. Maybe we'll have some good news next time that one of these buildings has been sold. That'd be great. Thank you very much.